Alright, this will be our final video for factoring quadratics with leading coefficients. It is AA5 on your IXL. We've already done the first three problems. We've got these three left, so if you want to kind of look at those, start working through them. I've got one more on the back. I'll flip it over real quick if you want to work through that one as well. And those are J's, by the way. They're the letter J. I should have changed the variables, but I didn't. All right. Now, looking at number 4. In the previous problems, we've had all addition. There's been no subtraction that we've had, so we're going to be working through some subtraction. Looking at this one right here, you guys still got to do your A times your C, so A times C. So you get 3 times 3, which is 9. Okay, so all the factors of 9, 1, 3, and 9. All right? Now, what combines to make negative 8? Well, one of these numbers have to be a negative in order to that to be negative 8. Okay, when you have a minus in the back, one of the numbers have to be a subtraction. Okay, one of the numbers have to be a negative. So which number is negative? So you can have negative 3 and 3, and it cancels, it doesn't work. You can have negative 1 and 9, which gives you 8, or you can have 1 and negative 9, which gives you negative 8, which is what we need. So 3x squared, rewriting the problem, and then your minus comes first when you write this, because the smaller factor comes first. So the negative 9 will come first, so 9x. So breaking that down into 9x and 1x. So 1x, we're just going to put x, okay? And then minus 3. So now we're going to be breaking this down. What do these two have in common? Well, this divides by 3, this divides by 3, so we know a 3 is going to come out, and this also has an x. Both of them have an x, and x is going to come out as well, okay? And so now we have 1x left here, and then 9 divided by 3 is 3, minus 3, and then x divided by x gets rid of the x, so we're left with x minus 3. Now, you've probably already noticed what's left, okay? So when you're factoring out this guy, the x minus 3, factoring out the x minus 3, nothing comes out of it, okay? Just like we had in the previous video in our last problem of that video, nothing comes out of both of these, but something has to. Okay, but nothing looks like it does. A 1 does. X divided by 1 is still x. 3 divided by 1 is still 3, so x minus 3 is still inside. Notice, they are the same. So, 3x plus 1, and then x minus 3. Okay? All right. Looking over here, a little bit different. Over here was minus minus. This one is just a minus on the inside. So if this is a minus on the inside and this is a positive in the back, you know what this is? Two numbers multiplied together. So the way you get two numbers multiplied together, hopefully you said you multiplied two negatives, which would be correct. So breaking this down, you've got 2t squared. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but we'll go ahead and do the factoring up here. So 2 times 7, I'm still got to do that first. 2 times 7, and I kind of skipped it. 2 times 7 will give you 14. So what are the factors of 14? So factors of 14 are 1 and 14, 2 and 7. Okay? So how do you combine two negatives? So these numbers will be negative. So negative 1 and negative 14 make negative 15. Negative 2 and negative 7 make negative 9. So that's what we're looking at, negative 2 and a negative 7. So a negative 2 and a negative 7. What comes first? Well, the smaller number comes first. Okay? All right. Be a little bit of magic on this one. So what comes out of both of these? The first two numbers. I'm going to go ahead and break it down like we were doing earlier, so that way this one makes a little bit more sense. Okay. like we were doing yesterday in the first 2 videos, kind of breaking it down a little bit more. I didn't do it in that last problem. That was my mistake. Probably should have. All right. What do these have in common? Hopefully you only seen a t, which would be correct. So you have 2t left and a minus 7. Okay? 2t and a minus 7. Now, if you look over here, you might be looking at that and going, that's not really going to work. And it doesn't really. If I broke this down, there would be a 1 in the front because this doesn't have anything in common, and then 2t plus 7. How does that work? This would be a minus 2t. These aren't the same. So how does that work? Well, instead of getting rid of a 1, or taking out a 1 of both of these, I could take out a negative 1. Now, if I take a negative away from that, that makes it positive. Oop, here I'm going to erase the whole thing. That would make it positive. So 2t. Okay? If I took a negative away from that one, it would make it positive. If I took a negative away from that one, that would make it negative. So guess what? They're the same now. Okay? We were like, oh, there's no negative there. There's always a negative. You can take it away, or you can add it in there in some form and fashion. You just got to know how to do it. Well, in this case, we're just taking a negative away from here, which would end up taking a negative away from here, which would end up just reverting it back to from positive to negative. Like this would take negative back to positive. Okay? All right, so our answer should be t minus 1 and 2t minus 7. So like you said, if you had a negative or a positive number in the back up here, you need 2 negative numbers to make that one. Okay? And that's what we got. All right. Now over here. This one is a little bit different. Okay? You're like, holy cow. Look at these. Bigger numbers. We haven't had anything really over an 11 yet. We really have it. Or a 13. When you have a coefficient in the front, and you notice back in our first lesson video, I'm going to go ahead and flip the paper back, we talked about this note, and I said make sure you make a note, highlight it, because we're going to come back to it. Well, now we've come back to it. Always make sure that nothing can factor out in the beginning, okay? Now is where that's coming into play. A 7 can come out of all of these, okay? A 7 can come out of 7, a 7 can come out of 35, and a 7 can come out of 98. So we're going to take a 7 out of that in the beginning, and that's going to be part of our final answer, all right? So we're going to take a 7 out. I'm going to go ahead and write the answer down here. We usually don't make it down this far, but we're going to go ahead and write it down here, okay? So if I took a 7 out of everything, I'm going to rewrite the problem with no 7, or with a factor of 7 out of everything. So if I did 7 divided by 7, that gives me just the n squared. Ooh, this one has an n. I left that out. If I took out a 7 from the 35, that would give me 5n. And then if I took a 7 out of the 98, that would give me a 14. Okay? Now you're like, well, what the heck does that do? Well, first off, it makes your factoring a whole lot easier, right? If you did the A times the C and then did all of that, I mean, it's big numbers, it's a lot of work, and this just makes it so much simpler, okay? So, now we're going to be factoring. Notice that this one actually looks a lot easier than what we were doing, okay? This is going back to a few lessons ago where there was no coefficient, so n and n, and then we have a negative and a positive, which means one of the numbers is negative, one of the numbers is positive, and we just got to figure out which one. So factor out 14. 1 and 14, and then 2 and 7. So what numbers can subtract to make 5? Well, obviously, the 2 and the 7. So since the 5 is positive, the bigger number is going to be the 7, and then the 2 will be the smaller number since it's still a positive. So a negative 2 and a positive 7 is going to give you a positive 5. And then down here where we wrote our 7, we're going to do n minus 2 and n plus 7. Okay? So I factored out the 7 in the beginning, and then here's the rest of my factoring. All right, our last problem. We're going to do the same thing with this one. It's just a little bit different. So remember, these are J's. They're all right. Looking up here, that's a 20. I was looking at that thinking it was a 6. It's a 20. So factoring out a 30, a 50, and a 20. Well, what comes in at all of them? Hopefully you know it's a 10. So taking out a 10. Actually, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to write down here at the bottom. Or write it over the side since we don't have any more problems. So here will be our answer over here. Okay? So 10, taking out a 10. So we were left with 3j squared plus 5j and then minus 2. All right? Now, in the last one, we were left with just like an n squared. Now we got left with an actual coefficient more than 1. All right. I'm doing 3 times 2, so 3 times 2, or a times r. C gives us 6. So factors of 6. 1, 6, and then 2 and 3. All right? Now, remember, you got to add, subtract. So one of them is going to be negative. So that means we're going to be subtracting something but giving us a positive number. So if I did 3 minus 2, it's going to give me 1. Or if I did 6 minus 1, it's going to give me 5. So I'm going to be dealing with my 6 and my 1. So breaking this back down. Oop. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Writing the problem again. So 3j squared. And then our negative number is going to come first. So minus 1j, or just j, plus 6j minus 2. So remember breaking down the 5. So breaking the 5 down into a negative j and a positive 6. So 6 and negative 1, and it canceling to make the 5. Now, 3j squared minus j, and then 6j minus 2. So figuring out the two factors by the groupings. Here's our first grouping, here's our second. So what comes out of both of these? Hopefully you said a j. If a j comes out of a j squared, you're left with 1j left, and then don't forget the 3, and then minus 1. Okay, j minus j, or divided by j, is 1. And then what comes out of the 2 and the 6? Hopefully you said a 2. And then we're left with 3j, and then 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. All right, so our answer up here. So we've got factored out our 10. We've got a j and a 2. So a j and a 2. So here's our j, here's our 2. And then our last part is 3j minus 1. So there would be your answer.